On yesterday's date, the 24th of July, that was the anniversary of the last time I saw my parents. And that was the date my childhood ended. I lost my country, I lost my language, I lost my parents, I lost my culture. My name is Hanna Miley, and my little story is part of a big story. It wasn't till the war was over that I heard from the Red Cross that my parents had not survived. They had been gassed in a truck, and their bodies had been driven in the truck and put into a pit and then incinerated. That news added to the pain that was being pushed down inside. And the suppression of the loss of my parents, and also the suppression of the feeling of hatred towards Germany, it all came to a head. I had come to the end of my rope. It was just at that time, while I was teaching in England, that Billy Graham was beginning to be known. I was a bit skeptical about it all, and out of curiosity, I went to our local church. There were crowds of us. So I was sitting there in the pew with all the other people, kind of an observer, a distant observer, and sort of judging what was going on. But in the process, there came to me this sense that God was in this place, that God was real, and that God could see all that was within me. And it was a profound experience. I really, really believed in that first encounter with what God had done, that Jesus, yes, he had hung there and he had taken all the wrongs that had been done to me and my bad responses, that I could give them to him. I didn't realize it, but we were part of an epic rescue effort to take Jewish children from parts of Europe that were under Nazi control and take them to England. This is actually my visa issued in Germany for this journey. And if you look very close, you can see the swastika on the eagle stamp. It's stamped all these times. I was a little 7-year-old child, and I was climbing the steep steps of a German train. My parents had told me I was going to go on a nice trip. But, when I got to the top of the stairs and I turned round to wave to them, I saw that they were crying. And that was the beginning of a feeling of fear and dread. I got into the train and it was full of children. There were 10,000 children that were rescued. And I wore a label around my neck which had the number 8814. And that tells me today that I was kind of towards the end of the list. And I think the person who filled it out was probably my mother. And I see a lot of stress in this. Not many countries were willing to take Jews, but there was also a period when the National Socialists allowed Jews to leave. They wanted to get rid of them. My parents left it very late. They couldn't get out. So it was indeed a parting forever. I remember sitting in the corner of the train, all bound up in myself, and I felt that was the moment when I cut off the past. And I came into an environment that was really rather cold. I was taken in by an English family. They were like foster parents. They didn't know one word of German. And I remember feeling very afraid that I would forget all my German, and then there would be nobody in the world that I could communicate with. But the circumstances around my childhood in England were not tranquil and calm. I arrived in July, and the 1st of September, war was declared. And all around, people were very fearful that we would be invaded by Germany. My way of dealing with it was to try to fit in, to try to become a little English girl. I'm amazed that I still have this. I don't know how I still have it. This letter is addressed to the woman in England who has taken the child in. And you know, that came probably with me. But you see, my parents didn't know what would happen to me when I came to England. You know, it was years later that I learned, when I was a little child living with this foster family in wartime, we used to go to this very tiny grocery store, and this elderly couple would slice the cheese in those tiny pieces that you were allowed. I didn't realize, but their daughter had observed me. She had heard my story. And she, with great compassion, had prayed for me. And so I'm awed at the unseen things that go on. Behind all the activities, you know, what happened that day in that church in southern England was linked to that woman, I believe. And really, that was the beginning of my healing process. It was only the beginning. It's one thing to really believe and commit to forgiving in the protection and safety of England. You know, Germany in the past was far away, and Germany in the present was also far away. The Lord took me back to Germany to actually meet face to face with the children of perpetrators. I think of one event that took place in the city of Bonn, and actually that was the city I was born in. I was invited by a group of German Christians who wanted to do a walk to all the Jewish sites in Bonn and to just ask God's forgiveness. They invited me, and we finished up in the center of Bonn. It was raining, it was pouring with rain, and they had erected a little plastic blue tent, open, and they had asked me to tell my story. So I thought, what part should I tell? What should I read? They asked me to read from my book. So I thought, today is the day of the anniversary of my parents' death. I just felt that I had to give that testimony. And so I read about this sequence of events for my parents. And then I walked from the microphone back to the rickety chair. And a person who had not been planned to speak got up, and he started to talk in a kind of shaky voice. And he addressed me, and he said, "Hannah, your parents were murdered in Chumno. My grandfather was in the SS. My grandfather was a Nazi until the day he died. And he was stationed in Chumno on the date when your parents perished." And he said, "I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to say. Will you forgive me? And, it was an amazing thing. I felt like I was being raised up out of the chair, and I moved towards him, and we embraced. I said to him, I forgive you. And it was as though this great darkness, there was like this big light shining into it. For me, this experience in Bonn with Marcus was a very deep experience. What had transacted between God and me when I first heard about how I could bring to God my burdens of hate and anger and bitterness and victimhood, feeling poor me, he forgave me. I think that freed me up to begin the process, which is forever ongoing, to forgive. I think forgiveness is a living thing. It isn't just once and over. I felt like God was giving this to me as an opportunity to make real what had happened. Jews who find it impossible to forgive and also impossible to understand how another Jew could forgive. What they're grappling with, you see, is justice. I've had this said to me that I'm betraying my parents. God is merciful, He's loving, but He's also just. Without justice, how could you trust God? And for me, the answer is, I don't have to exact revenge, but I actually do put into God's hands justice. And I have a very deep sense that He will bring all things to right. And there's something very unique when you can bring blessing and healing to another person. You receive blessing and healing yourself in the most profound way. Sometimes people will feel very sorry for me because of the story of dislocation, of loss. For me, the books of the Bible are treasures of guidelines for sustaining the life that I have. It's like food for my soul. And I believe the Bible contains wisdom for 2023. It's a living thing. But I think of all the most wonderful examples. People like Joseph. He lost his family and he grew up in Egypt. Moses lost his family. He lost his Jewish heritage. He grew up in Egypt. And I think of Daniel. He was a captive from Israel. He was thrust into the depth of the culture of Babylon. So I think it's a mistake to think that life should be easy and it should be pleasant and just undisturbed. For me, Psalm 23 has become a source of meditation, and the words that stay with me are, "The Lord is my shepherd. I will not lack." We will not lack. He's our shepherd.